Good day, everyone, and welcome to Home at the Hollow. First, I want to thank you guys so much for joining me. It just means so much to me, but I'm so glad you're here. I have already started my holiday baking, and I am hoping that you are too. Today's recipe that I'm going to be sharing with you today is my world famous cornbread dressing. I'm going to give you a basic cornbread dressing. I make this every single year and have done so probably going on 35 years. I started 35 years ago, mostly because at that time my son was very young, and my husband came to me and he said, "Why don't you make dressing like my mother does?" So I'm like, well, okay, if she wants to share the recipe with me, that would be awesome. That would be great. So she gave me the recipe. I made it exactly as it was written down. And that was before the internet and all of that. And she wrote everything down for me. And at that time, they were living in another city and we were living in another city, but I thought, well, that would be a wonderful way to make my husband feel more at home. And I think probably he might have been missing his mother's cooking. So I tried it and it tasted really good had it been St. Patrick's Day. And the reason I said that is because she put in her recipe an unbelievable amount of parsley. And I don't know, to this day, I don't know if she meant to do it or whether it was a honest mistake. But no one needs 2 cups of parsley in their dressing. But you know what? I was really super young. I had no idea really how to cook. And from there on, from that moment on, I said, no more am I going to just let Aunt Jane Doe around the corner give me a recipe for, whatever, because this has happened to me one time before. Every single year, I would make my dad a birthday cake. And sometimes in between birthdays, he would ask for a cake. Well, he loved coconut. Well, I had the coconut cake down and strawberry. And a family member, by way of marriage, gave me a recipe for a strawberry cake. And it was, different than my strawberry cake. And I tried it and it was a dismal failure. It wasn't even edible. And I'm thinking, did they not want me to have the recipe and just gave me something? But I can guarantee you guys, I can tell you guys that all of the recipes that are going to be on this channel I have made for many years, and I'm not going to purposely steer you wrong, of course, but this is for it's just so moist and it's so good and it's so easy. It brings back very fond memories for me and my son. We would make it together every year at Thanksgiving. And so I hope that you and your children and or grandchildren can join in on the fun, because I like to have children in the kitchen with me and give them something to do other than, on their iPads or their computers or their phones or whatever it is that they might have now. Unplug them a little bit and get them to the point where you can keep them busy while you're busy. And there's nothing really I love better than to work with children. But it's an awesome recipe. I hope you give it a try. And without further ado, let's get started. So one of the first things that I'm going to do in prepping for my cornbread dressing, and today is going to be a mixture of cornbread and breadcrumbs, because I kind of wanted my dressing to be a little tender this year. It's going to just be marvelous like it is every year, but I'm preheating a pan. I've got about a quarter of a cup of vegetable canola oil, whatever you have. I have chopped an entire stalk of celery, 1.5 green peppers, doesn't have to be green, and an entire onion. And it doesn't, you don't have to worry about your knife cuts too horribly much. But I'm going to just saute this lightly. And that's nice. We have a nice hot pan. I'm going to saute this lightly until it is kind of crisp tender. I like to saute my vegetables before mixing it and placing it in my oven for my dressing. One of my fondest memories about doing this particular dressing, and I've done this every single year for, oh my goodness, many, many years, probably 30 years, is one of my fondest memories is that I would always get my son to help me make this dressing, no matter how old he was. He always wanted to help in the kitchen, and I like to still think that he has enough time to do it now, but as I would be sauteing the vegetables, and then of course subsequently allowing them to cool off, I would this is my baked cornbread, and what I did is I took it out of the pan and I put it in a turned off oven, but to let it dehydrate. But anyway, I would give him a big bowl, and with his little fingers, he would just, start to crumble up the cornbread. And by the time he got that done, and doing, a couple other things that young men do or little boys do, I would have this sauteed enough and cooled off enough for him to add it to it, and we would add everything to it. And I think he really enjoyed being a part of the Thanksgiving experience. To be thankful that we have so many options for food, so many places, and such fresh food too. So I'm very, very thankful. Not only do we have it, but we have the means to get really great fresh food. So I'm going to just saute this, and I'm going to allow it to cool a little bit, and we will carry on. So what I have here is the cornbread that I've shown you, and all you got to do is just give it a bit of a crumble. Now, years ago, I'm talking probably 5 or 6 years ago, I'd seen cornbread, like this, in big bags in the grocery store. And of course I've been shopping here and there ever since then, and I have not seen them since. I have seen large bags of cubed, white and winter breads in big bags, but I haven't seen the cornbread, and I'm not really sure what's up with that. But I went ahead and baked this cornbread, even though probably a bag, I think the bags of bread that they were selling was, I think it was like $1.50, something like that. But what I did with this cornbread, and it's, really easy to pick things up like that, but what I did with this cornbread is I just used a cornmeal mix, self-rising, and that, that was made an 8x8 pan. And I'm thinking, and I'm going to probably make a mess. You guys know I'm always going to make a mess in the kitchen. but this calls for 8 cups. And that's usually what I do. But I'm going to do it just slightly different. This is, I'm going to say, this is probably like 5 cups. But the reality is I'm going to say it's 4 cups. So I'm going to use that. And what I'm going to use is, if I can get this open, I'm going to use just a stuffing mix to make up the remainder of the 4 cups. Because I don't want to, have to dilute any of the eggs or anything else that I'm going to be putting in here. And there you go. That is just that quick and just that easy. And I will get the rest going and we will go from there. And so what I've added here are 2 cans of cream of mushroom soup. If you have cream of chicken, if you have cream of celery or a combination thereof, whatever you have, I'm sure works just fine. I've got 4 eggs here. And I've come to find that having room temperature eggs, of course, always while you're baking, but in a process like this, I don't know if you guys are finding the same thing, but when I start to crack the eggs, of course, I crack them in a separate bowl, but they seem to crack a little bit easier. I'm not really sure if there's any scientific anything behind that, but I give this a good mix. You may want to mix the eggs up ahead of time. That's okay too, whatever works for you. I'm going to add a teaspoon of garlic powder. And a teaspoon of rubbed sage, if I can. Or if you have poultry seasoning, that would be okay too. Just get this mixed a bit. I've baked this at the end before and had people walk in and just, what is that wonderful, wonderful aroma. And certainly if you want to add to that mixture, if you want to chop maybe some dried apricots, that would be a nice addition to it. But I'm going with just the plain basic recipe as I've been making it all these years. And just excuse my absence, I wasn't quite prepared this morning. I'm going to add a little bit of pepper to my dry here. So I think as far as I'm concerned, I have all of the liquids here. And of course, this is where my son would actually just, he would love every moment of this. And I do. I miss having the grandkids around. It's tough having such a close member of the family in the service and always moving every few years. It's a tough go. Let's set that aside. Give this a wee bit of a stir. And that was 2 cups of chicken broth in there. And I always, have a larger chicken broth container. Just because you just never know if you're going to need to really mix more into it. Because it definitely will bake off. I wouldn't want it to be soupy, but it will absolutely bake off. And we are going to get our vegetables that are just, kind of slightly cooled. Slightly. Because you don't want to cook your eggs. That would be a shame. It might make for an interesting Thanksgiving story, and I know that it seems like a lot of vegetables. And I am a heavy vegetable cooker, but I can tell you this is the most moist and delicious dressing that you will have. And certainly if you want to add, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of thyme flakes, just a couple, just a little. This is a big, and what I'm going to do now, if you're having a crowd, certainly 2 pans are totally appropriate, but what I'm going to do, since I'm not going to be feeding many, I'm going to add some to my 9 by 13, and then I have an 8 by 8 here. And if you haven't tried my magical miracle grease release, then I hope that you do, because I think that you will find over the holidays that you will go back and back and back. I've been keeping mine in the fridge, but I don't know. I'm hoping it's going to last a little while, but it's certainly, you know, appropriate to use in, you know, for this particular recipe. And this is the one that I'm going to bake off for me. And I don't think that it needs any extra chicken broth. And I put in just about 2 cups or 14 ounces, 14 and a half ounces. And I think it was probably enough. I think you might be surprised how this bakes up. It's going to be just incredible. And I certainly will want to make my 9 by 13 generous. It will bake down a little bit, but it's also going to puff up a little bit because of the eggs. And I think I'm going to add the very last bit of it. Excuse my dollar bowls, but you know what? Sometimes you just need a big old bowl. Big old bowl. And there you go. You guys, it is just that easy. You can bake these at 325 for an hour. And at which time, you know, I would give it a little bit of a look, but definitely low. And, you know, you will see it become brown across the top. Of course, I'm going to check in with you and show you how mine bakes off. So we are at the 40-minute mark, and I wanted to bring this out to show you just how this might be looking at 40 minutes. I'm hoping that you guys can see. I've prepared a baking sheet in anticipation of making the pecan pie as well. I hope you watch that too, but it has a little bit of give, and I'm not really sure if you guys can see, but I could see, you know, just here, let me get a fork. I certainly don't want to be poking my fingers in there. Let me get a fork. Let's see how this is going to look. Yeah. Let's see if we can get a decent view here. And I mean, I can still see a little bit of liquid. And so I certainly think another 10 minutes is appropriate. And we will get this back in the oven at 325 for another 10 minutes. Certainly your oven might be slightly different, but I'm going to let mine go 50, and we're going to go from there. And I really hope that you guys enjoy this recipe and give it a go. And we are back, and I have it cooled to the point where I can kind of touch it, but I wanted to give you guys a bit of a look-see. This is so moist and so delicious. And don't let the fact that there are canned soups in with this kind of dissuade you from working with this. This is really excellent. So I'm going to dish up just a wee bit, and we're going to see what it looks like. This is $3.25. I believe it was $3.25 for 50 minutes, no more. I did not bake this any longer than that. Let me set this aside. Try to. I got myself just a wee bit here, and as you can see, this, I mean, it holds up together really, really well. I'm going to take just a wee bit of a taste. And that was more than a wee bit. I can still taste some of the texture that I added the commercial, I think it was bread cubes, and they were pretty darn stiff. Even though I took my cornbread and I allowed it to kind of dehydrate, get dried a little bit in the oven, I can still taste a bit or two of, of the breadcrumbs, but it's delicious, guys. It is so good, and it is so easy. You know, if you don't want to deal with making your own cornbread, get just a mix. Although I would have to advise, just a little bit of friendly advice, I would advise you not to use the one, I don't want to say the brand, in the small box that makes sweet cornbread, because I find sweet cornbread is just not very good in this. But this is such an excellent basic recipe, and if you want to spring forward with this recipe, if you have some giblets, all you have to do with those, when at what point that you're cooking the celery, the onion, and the green pepper, go ahead and chop your giblets really, really finely and cook them in with your vegetables. You can do the same thing if you want something a little bit different. If you have a jalapeno, chop very finely some jalapeno, and again, cook it in with your vegetables. And at which point everything is cooled off and you're mixing everything, throw in a handful, and I mean a handful, like 3/4 of a cup of shredded cheddar, and bake that off. And so you'll have basically a jalapeno cheddar dressing dressing. You can add smoked sausage. Again, chop it up as fine as you can, saute it, make sure it's cooked well, and put it in your dressing. Bacon and Gouda are particularly very, very nice in this recipe. Crisp your bacon up well, shred your Gouda, and do it just the same as like a jalapeno cheddar. Just to make sure your bacon is cooked, spread throughout, and add the shredded Gouda right before you bake it. Mushroom and rosemary are also excellent additions to this. And there's one more that I want to suggest, is apple, dried cranberries, and pecans. And those of you who have not baked very much with pecans or any kind of a nut, all I would suggest, if you want to do like an apple cranberry dressing, of course, you know, peel and dice your apple up, cook it with the vegetables in the pan, just very, very lightly. Treat it like a mushroom and make it one of the last elements that you put in to cook. Add your dried cranberries to the mix, and then, you know, bake everything off. I would not add any kind of chopped walnut or pecan on the top of your dressing and then bake it off. There's no nut that I'm aware of that can bake at 325 for almost an hour and survive and taste good. Maybe 5 minutes before you pull this out of the oven, maybe sprinkle the pecans on there, but pull it quickly. Don't ever let your pecans just sit there and languish, because the oils in them will start to cook way quicker, and it will be not a happy thing. But as you can see, my kitchen is kind of a wee bit of a mess. The next thing that I'm going to be bringing to you guys is my world famous, yes, it's my world famous pecan pie, and I hope you join me for that, and I hope you consider making one, because this one is not only easy, but it is made a little bit differently than some of the other recipes that I've seen, and I hope you join me for that. But I hope you guys have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you so much again for joining me, and I hope you join me here again, home at the Hollow. Bye, guys.